title of the chat is Changing Perceptions, or Miners Winning Over Skeptics Who Question Their Environment Management Credentials. And Janice and I just discussed this beforehand. The way we want to structure this conversation, discussion is, as we go through, we're going to keep the floor open to questions. So I'm going to throw a few questions towards Janice. We'll keep it sort of within this framework, but if there's anything you'd like to ask Janice, she obviously has a lot of experience in a lot of different areas of our industry. Feel free, whether or not it's kind of in response to one of these questions or something else. We have her on stage here, so ask away.
I was going to say, and I'll be asking the questions back out to the audience, because I think you've heard a lot from me, so I hear from you guys as well. So I might put the same question back out to you.
So, Janice, the first question I have for you, have industry perceptions changed over the past decade, or are industry stigmas still preventing future growth?
So we've heard a lot about the perception of the industry, and I really think it depends on where you sit. Has the industry changed? Certainly it's changed tremendously in the last 10 years. Its environmental performance has changed drastically, and companies have really embraced more sustainable practices. And that's where we sit. I think we're in a room with like-minded individuals, and I think we would all agree with that. However, if you go out into maybe more the public domain, and all you have to do is a quick Google search like I did today, trying to see if I could find anything about actually specific relevance related to industry perceptions. It's incredible now with the ease of access to information, and that anybody can express their views widely. So have the perceptions changed? I think the perceptions may have actually gotten worse, because, and there's a number of reasons for this. I think, as I've said before, that images, while they might be images of somebody used the donkey and the pickaxe, or the tailings dam breach, those images are pervasive. They're everywhere, and they're lasting. And the commentary that's out there from individuals or from special interest groups, that's also out there. And a lot of times, when there's a lack of commentary coming from our industry or our sector, then the voice of those that are out there speaking is the loudest. What did I hear this when I was looking through, what were the videos this morning on YouTube? Mining is the most disruptive industry. Mining brings wealth to communities and to countries, and mining brings value through the commodities that it produces. It was a lot of negative information that was out there, and a lot of it's not necessarily most of it not very accurate. So have perceptions changed? I would say it depends on where you're sitting, and depends on your own perspective. So yeah.
And mining companies in general, even to back that up, the question sort of, or is the industry stigma still preventing future growth? I guess even to back that up, are we doing a better job than we were in the past?
Are we doing a better communicating or better job in our performance?
In our performance first, before we even communicate.
So yeah, certainly. I think there are a number of examples you can look at. I mean, MAC, the Mining Association of Canada, is towards sustainable mining practices. The adoption of those standards, not only in Canada, but now around the world, of companies that show the dedications to environmental performance and the improvement in environmental performance. There are also a number of environmental performance reports that are out there. And so, yes, there's clear evidence that the industry is improving significantly with respect to environmental management. But is that being communicated? I don't think it's being communicated very widely.
So if we have a communication problem, not a fundamental, we're not getting worse, which is, you'd think that would be easier to solve. So what can we do better? The word collaborate keeps coming up. Is that, do you think it's collaboration amongst the industry, or are we just not putting enough energy into communicating the benefits of what we actually do?
I think collaboration is part of it, because communication, certainly one-way communication, is not going to work. That sounds like you're preaching, or even worse, that you're advocating for something that, there's the question around trust comes up. So you need to have authentic information and authentic buy-in, and that's through partnership, and that's through collaboration. So it's being very transparent. Another word we've heard a lot about. The more that we digitize, the more that the information is freely accessible by everyone who wants to have access to that information, the more it'll be clear about the performance of the industries, particularly environmentally, but also socially and operationally.
And when we were chatting before, you mentioned the real imagery you were seeing in your Google search versus the cartoons.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So I was saying to Steve that when I was looking at some of the videos, so the ones that were anti-mining were full of imagery, real imagery of polluted waterways, of dead livestock. There was quite a few of that images of that. Just quite significant impacts. And then when I saw the positive about how wonderful the industry is and why you should welcome it, they were cartoons. There weren't real images. Yes, we're going to leave the land like this, and here's proof that we've done it. It was, here's a little stick drawing, and here's a little tree, and this is what it'll look like. And so you're saying there's, it'll be the pit will become a new lake with, as you said, with a beach. And so I think that we need to make sure that when we do communicate, we do so in a way that recognizes the intelligence of people, that they can see, provide real information, real images, real data, so people can make their own decisions based on that, rather than something that's kind of animated cartoon that it almost pokes fun at what what the industry has to offer.
And I think I would agree with you, and I gave you that example that our industry's reputation in what we do, whether or not we're doing a better job or not, is not being communicated. So it is, I would say, probably deteriorated in that time. And the example I gave was the project I was talking about yesterday in Val-d'Or that had been bankrupt in the past. They convinced in, say, would have been about 2002, 2003, they convinced the community to put an open pit in the center of town. And if we look at the marketing material that they were using as they went through this process, it was this is the reclamation plan, and it was this lake, and there was a sailboat on it, and there was a little beach, and the pit was only 100 meters deep. I don't know where they were going to fit a beach. But this was this cartoon that they put together, and to this day, it's a big hole in the middle of town, and a bunch of locals lost their pensions and other things when that company went bankrupt. We haven't as an industry, we're not communicating, we're not doing a good job communicating. We haven't really earned the right to put pictures of sailboats and everything yet. I think eventually maybe we'll get back to that, where kind of there's credibility behind those images that we put out, but we don't have that yet.
No, and I've heard that some people remark that, well, we don't need to communicate, because if we're communicating, that means we're defending ourselves. And if we defend ourselves, it means we're doing something wrong. So I don't know what people think of that message, but to me, I think it's the lack of communication, particularly now, this day and age, where communication and the availability of information is so widespread. When there is no information at all, then you're really it's almost like you're perpetuating the negative images by not saying anything.
And if any naysayer out there is using communication tools, be it social media, whatever it may be, all you're doing is empowering them by kind of not saying anything at all, regardless how good of a job you're doing.
Do we want to see what maybe someone in the audience might have to say on that?
Got one in the back there.
Thank you so much. I will preface this by saying there is hope, because I'm 30. I think I'm 36, so I think I'm still a millennial, maybe early stage millennial, and I'm a registered Democrat, and I support mining 7 days a week. So there is hope, but there's this perception, right? The stigma that we can't get through. We're really good at speaking to each other. Like we are in a silo right now, and I've had multiple conversations about, where are the data scientists? Why aren't they here? What about those startups? What about those innovators? Why aren't they here? Have we even welcomed them? So until that happens, this silo will continue and continue and continue. But my real question is about responsibility. Who's responsible if we break it in between the miners and the explorers and even the associations and the universities? It's all who's going to do a better job of it. But from our perception, what I see from the associations, who ultimately we buy into these memberships and we include our organizations in these associations to support us, they've basically turned into lobbyists, and now they're already polarized. right? It's either one or the other. And that's, unfortunately, we've gotten to that point, at least here in America. I kind of see it in Canada as well. But what about the associations? What can we do as members of these associations to say, you need to look at the demographics and where the public perceptions are of our industry and do a better job? Because we can't do it alone. Because we're fighting for dollars every day. So I guess that's a question.
So the first part of the question, I'd just say in terms of who should communicate, I think we all need to communicate. And we need to communicate in a way that I think that's in a lay language that people understand and with passion about our industry. The question about the association, and now I'll put my other hat on. So I'm president of the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum in Canada, of course. And that's a technical institute. It's a non-lobbying organization. So you have lobbying groups and you have non-lobbying groups. But I think regardless of whichever type of association you're dealing with, whenever we communicate, it needs to be evidence-based, right? Bring the validity of our message with data, with facts, with real examples. That's where it's no longer about trying to sway the point of view. It's being credible and authentic in the message, and I think that's what will make a big difference in terms of how we communicate it, whether or not our message is received properly.
And I think I would add to that too. Who is responsible? I think we're all, as participants in the industry, we're all responsible, but the buck does stop with the miner. If it's the company that is going to be impacting a site, and the various associations. So I'm a director of the Association for Mineral Exploration in BC, and been fortunate to get pulled into some provincial level discussions with our premier and others about the role actually of associations and kind of the role of government in this process. But ultimately, the associations are a tool that are are empowered by the work that the miner does. So if we do a good job as mining companies, we're gonna make our associations that much more powerful, and whether they're lobbying groups or not, they're gonna be able to really stick up for and defend what we do. But if we're not doing that, I think we really take away sort of the power of the associations as well. But I don't think it's the association's responsibility to communicate all of the good things we're doing. It's really on us as companies to do good things. Sorry, there's another question.
Yeah, I have the microphone. My name's Karen Olsen-Holt, and I consult here in Denver. And I do have a question for you. Seems like there's a really fundamental piece of this that we're all not addressing, and it's a minerals industry, and can we please stop calling this a mining industry? Mining is one small part of this whole industry. We create wealth by discovery and exploration, which hasn't been a big part of the meeting, but then we transfer that wealth to humanity, everyone. So I'm curious to know what your thought is, that if we can just eliminate the use of the mining industry, it's amazing how that transforms conversations at the table. And it's a minerals industry. We produce minerals. So I'm curious to know what you think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Often, depending upon whom I'm speaking with, I think in this room, we use the term mining. But when I'm speaking with maybe those that are not as supportive of the industry or they are not as knowledgeable, I use mineral resource development, because I think that's what it is. It's mineral resource development, and it speaks to the greater supply chain. You know, the process of mining is, for me, it's more the extraction piece, certainly not the processing, it's not the manufacturing piece. So yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we need to use the, I think, terminology that's most accurate. And I think it might help in that, that negative connotation that the term mining has, that we could probably benefit from a bit of a change, as I was noting yesterday, in terms of how metallurgy got changed to materials to make it not necessarily more accurate, but certainly more appealing. And it's not necessarily just about changing it to make it more appealing, but just to be more accurate in terms of what's being depicted in the full value chain. I don't know though, mineral. For me, certainly, I think mineral could be mineral or metal. It could be could be material. So I think the term mineral I'm not sure if that's the right term either. So see, when we start to talk about it, it becomes more complicated.
Yeah, and I think whether it's mineral or mining or whatever it may be, I think it's a conversation we need to have because we need to be thinking about the terminology that we use. How is that, if mining is automatically associated with negative press and everything else, then maybe we have to, we don't want to avoid that. What we should be wanting to do is improve kind of the reputation of mining, but at the same time, we have to present our message in such a way that's actually well received. There's another question.
I have a question here. I've spent some time looking at the materials that are produced by groups that oppose mining. And what jumps out from those to me is that these groups are engaging with the emotions of the reader. Mm-hmm. And given the state of politics today being a vortex of despair, the question is, can facts ever compete with that? You know, can you actually counter this emotional manipulation that's going on through the use of facts that actually require people to take the time to reflect and reach judgment? So are we behind the times here? Is that even possible?
That's a good point because I think, you know, facts appeal to a certain percentage or portion of the population. Probably many people in this room would facts appeal to them, but probably the greater proportion of the population, facts are not very appealing. Numbers, you know, I'd rather see, you know, imagery. But I think that we can utilize facts in a way that's more appealing, either visually. You see a lot more visual infographics, representation of data at Berlin. So you would have both the visual part, and that'll bring some credibility to the visuals. The emotional part, again, you have to understand the audience, I think, that you're trying to communicate with. And that audience will have certain, you know, for lack of a better word, hot buttons, things that will be key drivers for them. And they're not all the same for the audience that you're speaking with. So understanding your audience is important. It is going to be facts. It'll be numbers. It'll be things like dollars. That's emotional to many people. But some of them are not. It's about how you translate the facts, the real numbers, the substance, into something that's going to be to your audience something of interest. And that's something we don't do well at all because we just, you know, we might even, if we do talk, we spew out information. How many jobs, you know, 600 million jobs are in the Canadian mining industry. You know, we're the greatest employer of this. We produce 60 minerals and metals. Who cares, right? That's to your point. Yeah, so we do need to do a better job for sure. And that in doing so, engaging the people that can help us communicate. Not ourselves, you know. Many of us are people that are in technical fields, and you know, communications are probably not our strong suit. So, engaging the people that have that expertise to be able to help us get our message out. So, good question, Andy.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to that is I think we need to find ways to combat or use emotion as well. And those facts, all those facts you're talking about, there's within sort of a community that is now revived from a mining operation that is receiving economic benefit and jobs and everything else. There's going to be some phenomenal emotional stories within that can be used to sort of set the stage of this fact. Because you're right, everyone's attention span shrinks every day, and a picture of a tailings breach or something that grabs your attention. You have an emotional reaction. Dead fish sitting in a pond. Doesn't matter if it's natural or not, you're going to say, I hate mines after seeing it, if there's a mine within 100 kilometers of it. Aside from Integra Resources, I started a technology company called Verify, and it's essentially just virtual mine sites. You can go around the world. There's about 70 different tours now where you can go and poke around. And one of my favorite images in that is in Burkina Faso, and it's a company called Rox Gold. And when you can go through the entire mine site, go underground, but what that company has done and what you're kind of driven towards when you get into it is to go into the village, and there's essentially a virtual tour of a classroom just overloaded with kids, and all that company wants you to know is all the things that they're doing in the community, but you can't help when you look at some of these photos to have an emotional reaction to a filled classroom with 50 smiling kids and other kids trying to get their faces in the window just so that they're in the photo. I think that's what we really need to build on because mining has a lot of incredible stories, but just putting out fact sheets and data isn't going to work.
My question's related to the role of government in protecting the communities from environmental disasters and perhaps a mine closing without remediation. I guess it's a common occurrence. Company goes bankrupt right in the middle of a project. Remediation doesn't take place. It sits there for 50 years with an open pit or lack of environmental control. I guess why aren't the permitting agencies requiring upfront capital to be held in escrow through the life of the project in order to protect against that? And it seems like that would be an insurance policy where you wouldn't have to just rely on trust with the communities. You could have real dollars behind it.
I would say they are. I don't know. Are you? I'm from Canada. In Canada, we have to do closure plan. That closure plan comes with a financial assurance bond. Problem is, sometimes the costs associated with the closure plan are not well estimated. So estimating the appropriate closure costs, that's a challenge. But yes, the regulation requires an environmental assessment and a full closure plan and the financial assurance to make sure that the mine is closed out safely and environmentally. So that's being done in Canada.
Yeah.
It just seems like that can be communicated better.
Oh, absolutely. You're so right. I don't know how many people I speak to that say, why do they just allow people to do that and just walk away? They don't. But yes, in the past, it did happen, and we do have a lot of historic legacies sites that we have to pay for. Governments are paying for care and maintenance or closure, trying to close these sites, huge costs to taxpayers, for sure. But now, no, that's not the case. Though the estimates to be able to make sure that the closure is done sufficiently, that probably could be improved upon. But based on what we have today, that the financial assurance bonds are being posted.
Yeah, and that's my experience in Canada as well. The difference being a lot of the mine sites we're dealing with are kind of prior to this happening. So I think it's in Canada, it was about 10 or 15 years, and I believe it's still province by province, the actual rules. But in Quebec, for example, within 2 years of your mine kind of you starting construction, you have to have all that entire bond in place. So they try to structure it in such a way where it doesn't hinder your ability to finance your mine, but they're not kind of sitting there with their hands out 20 years down the road when you're long and gone away from the project.
I wanted to make a quick comment about the speaker that talked about facts or fiction. And the point is that
Right here.
in history, everything that is based on fiction or lie does not hold. It will fade away. And so it's important that we communicate the truth and make sure that we accept criticism as an industry and do a better job. I think whatever we dislike or we like, it's important to understand that the mining industry is going to be around for a long time. And it is up to us to make the future we want people, to look up to. So we should communicate, we should engage. If people are emotional and will not, buy the story we are telling, we should not be saddened by that. We should do the best we can to win them over. If we are not able to win them over, we should continue to tell our story. But I think it's important that, especially the industries, one of the things that I watched with horror was the Shell's episode in the Delta area of Nigeria. If you are familiar with it, the story left an indelible mark which was difficult to erase, especially given the reputation of that company in that region. And my sense is that all over the world, the mining industry, especially in the developing economies, have not lived up to the standards that it's important to communicate. And so it is encouraging that even today, companies have built sustainable development into their strategies. And so we should continue to do that and tell the story wherever we are called to, because in the long run, truth will always abide, and anything that is based on fiction or lie will fade away.
That's a good point. I think we need to continue to tell our story, and we have to, like you said, we have to improve and we have to learn from the mistakes of the past. There's a question there.
Yeah, there's right here. Happy to keep doing this.
Yeah,
Hi, my name is Letitia Geetson, and I'm with a company called Polymet Mining. And we're a development company, and this is more of a statement, but it kind of goes to the conversation. We talked a lot about social license, and local communities where we're developing our mine are incredibly supportive. And the part of the conference that I found the most frustrating is not really dealing with the anti-mining groups. And how do we address those? Because there's nothing that we're ever going to do to satisfy them. Their purpose is to stop, in particular, our project, stop progress. And so one of the things that I think is really important and what we've been doing successfully is somebody to be that third-party advocate, right? I mean, you can tell those emotional stories. We work very closely with the building trades and the local business community across the whole state. And so the people that are the most successful, if we defend ourselves, we're defending the company, we're there to make money. We really need to figure out how to, certainly nationally and across the globe, get those third-party advocates.
Yeah, I agree with it. It's always more credible if the information or the argument comes from somebody else who's not seen to have a vested interest. And how do you manage certain groups that have an interest to prevent mining, and they're not even within the local community, they're not even within the same country sometimes. How do you do that, and how do you get somebody to advocate on behalf of the industry? I don't think we've even had that conversation that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if you are, Steve. And I mean, it has to be, though, I think genuine. It has to be somebody that's going to come forward. Maybe it's learning from experiences. We talked about the emotional piece. Individuals who've grown up and lived in mining towns, I mean, many of them, if you speak to them, they love the industry. The industry has been very good to them, to their families. The livelihood that they've experienced has been positive. Maybe it's individuals like that would need to speak on behalf of the industry in a very impartial way. But it's a good point. I don't know how to implement it.
Yeah, and I think, and not to oversimplify it too much too, I think a lot of it just really does come down to communication and in communicating kind of the right stories to the right people. We also have to acknowledge that we're in an industry where not every mining company is perfect. And I think the people here talking about the future of mining are people who actually care about mining and want to see kind of the resource industry continue to grow and thrive, create wealth for future generations. But there is a portion of our industry that gives us a really bad reputation. And I don't know what the answer is by any means, but I think we need to always be kind of looking at how we communicate what we do as an industry, but also we need to find ways to self-regulate ourselves too, where we don't allow sort of the kind of the 5%, the 10%, whatever it is, the headline-making disaster, bankruptcy stories really impact the rest of us. And who knows where our industry needs to go to get to that? There's a lot of other industries that have been disrupted by, like, I'll use, as an example, I use the taxi industry. The taxi industry is very different today than it was before because Uber came along. And Uber didn't just make everyone kind of bring us a whole bunch of new drivers so we had more options. Uber gave every person, every market participant a rating system. And if an Uber driver has a poor rating system, it's very hard for them to get rides. We don't have anything, any sort of a generic accountability system like that in our entire industry. But if we did, you would think that sort of the bottom 5 or 10 or 20%, whatever that number is, wouldn't be able to find investment and push forward. So that's a kind of out there answer in a lot of ways. But I think we need to, not to generalize, but I think we need to find ways to communicate the success stories, but also at the same time whether it's in a self-regulated fashion or not, find ways to distance ourselves from kind of the things that we don't want to be associated with our industry.
And I think the Mining Association of Canada is that with their Towards Sustainable Mining. So, you know, the companies that are members of MAC all subscribe to that, all go through that review, and all get rated. So it's the ones that aren't part of it.
Yeah.
And for, I think, the communication piece around who's part of these programs that support sustainable mining and who's not, and recognizing, allowing communities, even special interest groups, to understand the difference between those that subscribe to these programs and these policies versus those who don't. You know, it's like that rate your teacher online, you know, we need something like that.
Yeah. And I think, not to be too negative on it either, your point about the NGOs, there will always be NGOs and indigenous groups and other local groups, whatever it may be, that are not pro-mining. And we have to accept that as part of it. We will never get 100% adoption to what we do because it is a disruptive business that we're in. We need to accept that and do the best job we can, but we cannot. I think we have to always keep our expectations in check as well. I gave the story about Val d'Or yesterday, and that was 100% adoption. But that's not normal. That's a mining community in a safe jurisdiction.
No more questions? We go to questions on the. I could carry on.
Let's continue on. We're through the first question now. If I didn't bring a watch up on stage, if somebody can just keep us accountable to the time.
Oh, I think we're
250 is where we're going for. I know the chair if we have to go a little bit over.
250. We're okay. Yeah.
How are successful renewable energy projects influencing planning for the mines of the future?
Well, certainly, I mean, energy is important, certainly for the industry. 30%, I think, of its expenditures, operating expenditures, go towards energy. We're seeing more and more implementation of probably hybrid systems going, you know, from getting off diesel. I think that you've seen a strong commitment from industry to look to getting off diesel. And so looking at renewables. Yesterday, there was an announcement from my department to provide $5 million to Goldcorp's all battery electric mine, the Borden mine. And today there's another one that's not on renewables, but it's on energy efficiency for comminution called the Crush It Challenge. But back to renewables, we're seeing more of that. Even now about the small modular reactors. Hasn't happened yet, but recognizing, number one, that you can have renewable energy. Number two, you can have a secure source of renewable energy, something that there's not going to be supply disruption. And three, potentially an opportunity to be able to give back to the grid, if there is a grid in your region, and actually generate value. So we're seeing far more of that in that integration between different types of energy applications, whether they be wind or solar or bioenergy. So more and more of that certainly is happening. And I think the remote regions are driving that because they don't have the easy access to cheap electricity that some other areas do. So they're having to put their own renewable sources in to be able to provide that security of energy.
And do you think from a mine planning perspective, if like energy is, there's a cost associated with energy, but if it's a renewable source of energy, just assume you have unlimited energy at zero cost or a very low cost. How do you think that is going to impact your actual mine planning from your processing to your extraction the entire way through?
I don't think we'll ever get, in the near future, I don't think we're going to get to 100% renewable.
Yeah.
Are things going to become less efficient? I don't think so either. We are already, we talked about the ball mill how many times already, but in terms of processing, we're not going to go with more energy intensive because there's still a cost regardless. There's going to be a cost. You may be renewable, you may not be paying for the kilowatt hour, but you're paying for maybe in terms of CapEx. So I don't think you're going to see less efficient processes. You're just going to see a greater recognition of the opportunity around renewables and the opportunity around clean energy versus carbon-based energy, and the risk around environmental impact in terms of just even managing diesel itself. So I don't think we're going to see more energy intensive, even if we have all the electrical energy that's available that we're generating. But that's my perspective. Audience?
if there are no questions, why don't we sorry, one question.
Capacity for cash generation.
Sorry?
Capacity for cash generation.
There's a
Cogeneration, yes. There's certainly going to be capacity for cogeneration. And hybrid systems are definitely the way that we're going right now. We can't get fully off diesel yet. So. But one of the challenges is in around storage, right? So sometimes that's what's limiting.
Now, something you mentioned earlier when we were discussing before, tailings is a resource. Why don't we get into that?
Favorite topic.
That's not a question, but I feel like if I just give that to you, you'll take it away.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of saying the same thing over and over. But yeah, so I strongly believe that about tailings and other waste, but particularly tailings, I think they're the easiest option right now as a resource for resource replacement. It's not going to replace everything, but it's a opportunity to, again, address environmental legacies, an opportunity to be able to extract cost effectively, because it's pre-ground, might need a bit of a, a little bit of surface changes to be able to make sure that it's amenable to further processing. And then we talked this morning at the green mining presentation about an opportunity around branding commodities as green, from being able to look at them as from a waste material rather than from a greenfield development. So it's a win-win-win. It could provide a secondary industry for those that are mining communities where the mine is closed down. Could provide for certainly reduction in the liability associated with the management of those, whether that be from a government or a mining company with ongoing care and maintenance, treatment costs. And it provides, I think, what we need to do really open our eyes at is all of that material that we've already extracted from the ground, what's in there that we can actually make use from. Yes, we might have taken a very small amount of gold out of a whole pile of rock. Can we use that rock for other purposes? What's in, can we, certainly the construction materials, that's a no-brainer, but looking at advanced materials, the residuals that's in there, we haven't really examined in detail what's already been extracted from the ground and what we can make value out of. Yeah. So the metals, that's straightforward, but there's a far more, I think, greater opportunity around looking at the residuals and making sure that the end, that ultimately if we move down that track, can we learn enough that we minimize the amount of tailings we're actually producing? That's what the ultimate, So by reprocessing, we can learn how to take full utilization of the material we're taking from the ground. What we can't extract value out of, we can backfill. Of course, we can't backfill everything, so let's try to be able to extract the value out of everything other than what we need to put back underground.
So an example that just came to mind, actually, the company I used to work for, and I can't take credit for this idea, it was the chairman, but when we made an acquisition, it was a bankrupt asset, it was about a $100 million mill, and came with a tailings facility, waste rock pile, the open pit that should have had sailboats in it. And we bought it for $1.8 million cash, and it was about $3 or $4 million in stock. The next day, we sold the waste rock piles to a local construction aggregate company for $1 million. And so for the $800,000 we had to put out, we felt like we got quite a bit, but within about 3 months, that is now the second largest gravel quarry in the Val-d'Or district. And the interesting part, again, I can't take credit for the idea, but that pile of rock literally sat on the edge of town, kind of overshadowing the town for 10 years. And just through we can say it was innovation, but it was just through a conversation. He knew somebody in town that worked for that company. The conversation started, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden they jumped on top of it. But I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit within our industry, whether it's in old mine sites or in kind of the planning for new mine sites, that kind of going back to the theme of a lot of this conversation, green mining in general and showing that we are good corporate citizens. There's a lot we can do, and I don't know if it's all that hard.
No, it's not that hard. It's we may need to put in place some policies and practices, maybe to address some engineering concerns, but no, it's not that. It's a no-brainer, and the potential benefits far outweigh any challenges, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I asked you before, you've touched on a lot of different topics as we've gone through it. What are you most excited about? You mentioned convergence. I'll let you take that away, but what are you most excited about as kind of where our industry is going in the future of mining?
Probably like everybody in this room, I love this industry. I think I heard somebody say that. The people in it are incredible. It gets a bum rap, unfortunately, despite all it's doing. And I don't think it's just sometimes making connections about what we're doing and how to close off loops or challenges that we're having. We've heard about, social license, and we've talked about environmental practices. We talked about our resource depletion, and we talked many of the risks that the industry is facing. So a lot of these things converge, and it's a matter of, as you said, it's low-hanging fruit. It's making slight changes to what we're doing to be able to address some of these issues and how they come together. And the communication of it, I don't think what I'm most excited about is the potential opportunities for the sector. And looking at ways we can do things differently. We've heard a lot about the opportunity around data, AI. That's going to open up things even further, and that leads to greater opportunities, not only looking at the resource itself, but how we manage the resource. And yeah, it's exciting times. It's exciting times. I think, we've had a bit of we've had some negative discussions, but we need to do that. We need to be honest with ourselves, but we are going to be incredibly important towards society as the society becomes more and more high-tech, more and more digitized, and it's a matter of taking those opportunities and showcasing them, but doing so in a way that improves upon, we were saying, improves upon what we've learned. So how we make up for mistakes from in the past, and showing that yes, we have financial assurance bonds. Yes, we understand how to manage tailings. Yes, now we're looking at how we can extract value from those resources. And now the community is part of us. They're partners. We're no longer, it's not an impact benefit agreement, it's a partner-to-partner relationship, and it's moving forward collectively. And more engagement is only going to help the industry to better position itself, not only with stakeholders, but with communities and with governments, with everybody, with society as a whole. And telling that story, we're going to have some good communicators. And I think one thing I need to add on that is, which hasn't come up too much, is the lack of mineral literacy in society as a whole. They don't, I think I saw in some presentations where, yes, they don't understand where their raw materials come from, but the lack of mineral literacy, not only within, with children and the public, but in the school system, with politicians, and that's another role somebody's going to have to take on to be able to communicate better in lay language how the process works. Maybe not using cartoons, but the lack of mineral literacy is something that challenges our industry as well. It hasn't come up that much in
and
discussion.
There's no shortage of communication tools that
But
we can use to do it.
Textbooks, some textbooks are quite harsh in terms of the industry, in terms of how it's presented to children, the next generation. Yeah.
So last question before we open it up again. What do we do, in your opinion, it might be a tough question, what do we do so we're not, there's a lot of people here that are very excited about the industry, believers in the industry. There's a lot of interest we've seen, especially on the academic side, of kind of what can they do to prepare the next generation. What do we do to make sure we're not having the same conversation 5 years from now at the Future of Mining Conference?
We need to talk to people outside of this room. Yeah. We need to engage them. We have to, don't leave this room and go away and forget about it. Or maybe you're on the plane on the way back, talk to the person you're sitting next to, and to maybe tell them about this industry and how exciting it is and what it has to offer. I know sometimes it's difficult to brag about the industry, but we need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to transfer that information, that knowledge, and we need to do it and have that conversation with people that aren't in this room. We love talking to each other, because we're all great people, but we need to talk with others as well. That's critical.
Completely agree. I think we'll open it up to any questions here. Okay. We got one in the back here. How we doing?
I'll always think of something if there's a gap.
Thanks, Andy.
You talked earlier about hooking up with an aggregates company to make use of a waste rock pile. And this is quite recognizable in many industries as industrial symbiosis, where one company uses the waste products of another company. Typically they get together, they form a kind of a cluster of industries, and it turns out to be quite efficient. The question is, why does this not happen more often in mining? Is it just because mine sites are generally quite remote? Is it a lack of an economic development perspective? Is it that miners don't perhaps consider the business case? They're focusing on their core business? What would you say would enable more industrial symbiosis in mining?
In that specific case, a lot of it had to do with the fact that that project was tied up in bankruptcy for an extended period of time. So maybe that's why. It's because most mining projects are tied up in bankruptcy. What I think one of the main reasons is it's a boom or bust industry in a lot of ways. And when the times are good, you don't care about that extra $1 million you could get for your waste rock or anything else. Everything is bigger is better. Get that rock into the mill and move as much material as possible. So I think kind of the cyclical nature of our industry really, and we can pull it back and talk about how that impacts innovation, but it really impacts those decisions. So I think a lot of the time you have to look at the actual specific time period when those decisions are being made and when that mine's being built. And it's kind of the beauty of our industry. It can be a lot of fun sometimes when things are really rocking and rolling, but it really works against us in the big picture. So I don't know. I think we as an industry always need to be looking for those ideas. I think the other non-mining groups, in that instance, the aggregate companies within that area, are just as responsible. They should have seen that opportunity as well. But I think we need to try our best to kind of remove that cyclical view and start making longer-term decisions. But as everyone in this room knows, when times are good, they're really good, and you're not thinking about the little tiny efficiencies to make your operation better, the little tiny things that in the long run could play a big role.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with that. I think it takes a mind shift to say that looking for those opportunities, and there are some sites that are doing that. Anaconda in Barry Vert in Newfoundland, they're doing total resource utilization, and they're shipping their waste rock down as Armourstone down to North Carolina. They're using some of their residuals for looking at aggregates to support vegetation growth. So a lot of things. So they're not looking at just simply the waste rock as a waste. They're looking at what are the opportunities. But you have to start, I think, at the beginning. It goes back to the question about mine planning, and it's not saying that you couldn't start doing it in the middle of a mining cycle, but looking at the potential of what you're extracting from the ground. You're taking a lot of stuff out. You've got to be able to look for those opportunities to do something with it.
Well, there's rock and there's rock. Not all rock is suitable for building materials.
No, that's right.
We had in California, an open pit mine, a lot of waste rock. And I mentioned to the company this might be, there's a big demand for rock for building. Well, they came in and investigated, and it's not the right type of rock. Another thing, too, you're very right about the waste materials. When I was with Newmont, chairman of Newmont, I called me to his office, and he said, we have copper smelters all around the world, and I want you to look into maybe utilizing this slag for other purposes. And we did in South Africa. We were able to modify the chemistry slightly, a mine called O'Keefe Copper Company, and we were able to replace Portland cement completely, 100% for mine backfill. But we've never been able to sell this elsewhere. But it would save millions of rand in this case.
But it's that kind of thinking, I think, that we need, where we can look at that opportunity. Maybe it takes a slight modification in a process to be able to produce slag that's not going to leach, and it can be beneficial as a binder for backfilling. It's those kind of change in thinking that we need to do. So rather than just looking at the conventional way, we do that. And I think that's It's a challenge almost to the consultants, because often they, or the engineering firms, they'll propose the same process all the time. It's looking at that communication and looking at the opportunity analysis. Sometimes it's just a matter of, yes, rock may not be suitable, but in that case that you've given the example of modifying the slag for utilization purpose, that's exactly what we need to be doing.
I think there's a question right over here.
I just wanted to, I've heard a lot in the last couple of days how we've had a bum rap, we don't get the message out, and where are we going to be in 5 years? Are we going to say the same things? And I'd like to challenge you and say, okay, maybe at another conference, you bring some ideas to the table, because we're hearing collaboration, innovation, we're hearing all of these wonderful things. I think we're all practicing them in some degree, but we're not sending out the challenge to say, how can we physically do better and get some ideas on the table so people can use that as a jumping board. You also mentioned about closure. I have an Ontario mine, and we do have a very robust closure plan, but we also have a number of American operations, and they put money as bonds towards an acreage. And usually that money is very small, and it certainly won't close your operation adequately. Thank you. And so I was thinking, it's hard to show yourself accountable when you really don't have the funds available to do a decent job and walk away. To speak to the abandoned mines, we did that in Ontario, and we put money as an organization through the Ontario Mining Association. And, oh, you can hear my voice tremble, excuse me. We needed to change legislation to have a Good Samaritan Act to be able to do some of that. It was just baby steps, but again, we're collectively saying, that's from the old days, we're the new, but I think we have a responsibility to look back on the old and help correct it, and that will go a long way towards changing our image. And my last point is if we had a global, we talk about investors, they want green operations, they want to invest in a green way. I think it was your wife who said at RBC, whatever you put the money in, you put it in to something green. Could we not establish as an organization some kind of metric that says we are a green corporation through either different, it's like Boy Scout badges, you have to attain certain levels, and then the investors can say, here we have a green mining company and they're worth investing in. So I've brought a lot of things to the table, but they've been interesting me as I hear over and over the same poor me stories, and I don't think it's poor me. I'm very proud of the company that I work for. I think we're forward thinking. I think we're an industrial mineral company, so we're kind of your poor cousins to the metals, which goes to the point of minerals. We're not metals, but we're forward thinking. We've got some great ideas. We're collaborating. We're looking inward. We're looking outward. I think we have an amazing future ahead of us. I'm proud to be part of it. I'm proud to be part of mining. And I think we have a rich heritage to build on, but I think we can certainly do more in the future and get away from the poor me attitude. So thanks very much.
I think you'd be a great spokesperson. You need to get out there and talk to people, because you're clearly passionate, and that's what we need, is the people to talk passionately, but to provide those concrete examples. To your point about the greening and the certification of green, we had a bit of a discussion about that this morning in one of the sessions. We do have opportunities to verify green processes. We haven't gone to certification of green. If it's something that the industry feels is relevant, then that's something we could look towards. We do have, like I said, TSM. TSM is a way of evaluating performance, environmental performance. So it is another kind of a benchmarking tool or policy that the industry has has to be able to utilize to be able to show that how they're performing based on a series of different environmental criteria. So yeah, I agree with you. And you should get out there and communicate your story.
And I would agree with that, and I think it's actually a really good point to close on. We're not, the Future Mining Conference isn't just a group therapy session to talk about how kind of we need to communicate better. I think we all here, and I completely agree with you, I 100% believe that mining, mineral extraction, mineral resource development is a very good thing, not only because we need minerals, but because of the benefits that we give to society, to communities, to whoever it may be. For me personally, it strikes a chord with me because it's a reason I'm not sitting back in an executive position in a company. It's why I started a technology company based on kind of exactly that. So what can we do to make sure that we're not having this conversation again and again and again? And to me, the tools right now don't exist for us to be able to communicate the benefits of our industry. And I think if we can create those tools and give those tools to investors, I think investors will hold our industry accountable, and that will help kind of bring us all forward. And within that, maybe you'll see a bit of divergence, the lower kind of 10, 20, whatever % of our company that really gives us a bad rep. Maybe they just fall away because they're no longer investable, and mining is a capital-intensive industry. So kind of without capital, we will not survive. So it's a really good point, though. I think it's important for us to acknowledge the kind of either be it the criticism or the headwinds that we as an industry have, but I think we're all here together because we believe there is a future of mining. On that note, next up we have George Hemingway with a final keynote. But thank you very much. Thank you, Janice.